Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Michael from the Honest Youth Pastor, back with day 2 of looking at progressive Christian TikToks. In case this is your first time viewing this video, doing 5 days of looking at videos from TikTok from progressive Christians and addressing the issues and or answering the questions, or attempting to, that they present in their TikToks. The idea here is not to criticize or troll these individuals, rather than to genuinely try to answer the problems that they're presenting or the questions that they're asking. So we're going to watch it all the way through, then we'll go back through and kind of address the different issues that they present. So let's get into it.
I'm going to piss some Christians off, but that's kind of my brand. I never understood the argument against gay people in the church, because it's like, okay, we have to call out habitual sin, sure. So does that mean that I get to call you out every time you speed? Because breaking traffic laws is breaking the laws, and technically that's a sin, right? So by that logic, you deserve as much hate as you give to gay people. And if you want to use the Levitical laws, sure. But doesn't that mean that we shouldn't cherry pick? We should use all of them. So that means, no mixed fabrics, no shellfish, no pork, no going to church on your period. Maybe that's like a little unreasonable, don't you think? It's almost like it wasn't written for us. That's crazy. Maybe it was written for the people at the time and the place. And if you want to use be fruitful and multiply, okay, now what's your argument against people who choose not to have children? Are they sinning by not having children? What about the straight couples that can't conceive? Are they sinning? Are they being punished by God for their infertility? No!
All right. So there is that. Again, like I said yesterday, don't go trolling. That's not a very good thing to do. So we're going to go back through and address some of these issues that she's brought up within this TikTok. Now, one of the things that we're going to see that I should have mentioned yesterday that I didn't is that oftentimes arguments presented come across as, oh my goodness, this has never been asked before. How do we answer it? Like, I just don't know. Now, the good thing for us is that the church has been around for a really long time. It's had some very good theologians in it, and they have answered these questions and provided them for us in different ways. The most notable are going to be the creeds and the catechisms, in which they address probably the more broad issues that then can be applied practically to these underlying issues, many of which she presents, right? So just to give you a heads up, I'm not going to be able to answer all of these questions in depth, but I do want to provide with you in the description links to videos that will be able to flesh this out a little bit better and say it way better than I can. But I want to direct you there, and as kind of an additional thing to this video. So let's start and look at her first point, and then we'll get into the rest of them.
I'm going to piss some Christians off, but that's kind of my brand. I never understood the argument against gay people in the church, because it's...
Okay, so we'll go back here in a minute, but I just want to start from the get-go. I am not deliberately picking progressive Christian TikToks that mention LGBTQ. But this is a theme within progressive Christian TikToks. This is kind of like the thing that they all talk about, all right? So just to make that clear. Secondly, we're going to address and answer this the same way that we did yesterday. The idea is that this young lady is saying that she doesn't understand why... she never understood the argument against gay people in the church. Now, here's the distinction that we've talked about before. I will link the same video again below. But the idea that there is a distinction between people just coming to your church and attending your church versus being a part of your church, like membership, and having the responsibilities of those members as far as making decisions, voting on things, having their voice heard on different policies put in place, in addition to those that are eligible to become leaders and elders in the church, always come from the memberships that have agreed to the creeds and the catechisms of that particular church than what they hold to, right? So there is a distinction here, and oftentimes because of the modern day church not really emphasizing that or talking about that, and some churches just simply not having that, then people will get very confused about the difference here. So just be clear, it's not that anyone would say that the argument against gay people in the church. I think every church I know of would welcome anyone that is LGBTQ plus, as they would welcome anyone that used to be a thief, or anyone, or not used to be a thief, any thief, or any adulterer, or any liar, or any, I mean, you understand what I'm saying? Like, it's not that the church goes, hey, yo, no, you can't come in here. Rather, there is a distinction between those that can become members. A church would not let an adulterer become a member of a church because they're clearly breaking a law within the Bible. Same thing with the thief and so on and so forth, right? So that I just want to show you that there is consistency, or at least there should be consistency. So that's just kind of addressing that argument from the go. Let's keep going.
The argument against gay people in the church, because it's like, okay, we have to call out habitual sin, sure. So does that mean that I get to call you out every time you speed? Because breaking traffic laws is breaking the laws, and technically that's a sin, right? So by that...
Okay, so real quick, because she does have an additional point here, but I want to address that one. So there are certain things within the scripture that are called out, not only in the Old Testament, which we'll talk about in a minute, but in the New Testament as well. Okay, so there are certain things that are clearly habitual sins that are that should be called out. Now, to make note, a lot of those that are in the New Testament are within like a categorical list that Paul points out. And some of those are the things that the church really does need to call out, right? Liars, gossips, right? Those sorts of things that are put right beside the other things that people always like to talk about, which is adultery and homosexuality, right? So the church can be more consistent on that. Now, her example of the speed limit kind of shows her misunderstanding of how laws are applied within the church and how sin is called out. Now, again, one of those things with the speed limit is one of those things where we should be good citizens, right? That goes into more of a broader law and what that looks like, which is why when a Christian, if they are speeding, gets pulled over and gets a ticket, you should accept the fact that, hey, you did break the law and you are now under the penalty of the law and you now have to have responsibilities based upon that. So, I mean, I just want you to see the distinction. She's making an argument based on governmental law opposed to things that are clearly called out in the scripture as sin. So there is a difference here, and we'll describe a little bit more of the difference in detail in a moment, but that's because of what she gets into in a second. But so let's keep going.
Logic, you deserve as much hate as you give to gay people. And if you want to use the Levitical law...
Okay, so she's saying, I probably should have just let that play through. Let's let that play through real quick and then we'll talk about it.
Breaking traffic laws is breaking the laws, and technically that's a sin, right? So by that logic, you deserve as much hate as you give to gay people.
Okay, so there's an obvious idea here, and she's probably seen it, or she wouldn't be so passionate about it. But there's this idea that Christians are hate-filled toward homosexuals or LGBTQ+, right? Now, again, like I said yesterday, that is not necessarily incorrect on a minority level, right? There is definitely, and admittedly in the past, it was worse because of just bad understanding of grace and wrath, and it's just Christians not living out the gospel very well. But the truth is that, again, just like yesterday, you can't make a one-to-one comparison on the minority, right? So I think that the church has really done a lot better of a job of understanding grace and truth, right? Preaching truth and showing grace than we have in the past. Now, not just within the past as in the last 200, 300 years, but just the past in general. Like every generation has to learn this and be taught this and help to be understood what the gospel looks like lived out. So in 100 years, you're going to have the same conversation, maybe about the same thing, maybe about something else, but it's always going to come back to grace and truth, right? It's just something you have to, through sanctification, learn this process. So the idea here is she's equating one thing to the other, which again is, like yesterday, just a really bad argument based upon the fact that, well, you do this, so therefore you get the same outcome as this. And it's just not, she's basing it on the fact that Christians have been hateful toward homosexuals in the past, and some people still are, and she's equating the one-to-one comparison, which I just think it's just a bad argument because it's not consistent. So let's keep going.
And if you want to use the Levitical laws, sure, but doesn't that mean that we shouldn't cherry pick? We should use all of them. So that means, no mixed fabrics, no shellfish, no pork, no going to church on your period. Maybe that's...
Okay, so this is a common argument toward this whole thing, especially when you reference Leviticus. Now, there's a lot of ways this argument could go. Some people reference the wording in particular. Some reference the mixed fabrics and the shellfish and all of these other things. It's a basic misunderstanding of what the law looks like in the Old Testament versus what has been fulfilled now, yet what also still carries over. Again, there's going to be a two-part series in the description from, I mean, you probably guessed it, Mike Winger, but he does a really good job in a 2-part series of kind of fleshing this out, what that looks like, why it's done this way. And I'm just saying that I can't explain it quickly here in an efficient manner, but going there, you're going to be able to kind of see that. There's going to be a couple other videos too that are going to show, and I know some people might disagree with this, but the law broken up into different moral and ceremonial and civil laws, and within those different categories, certain things are already fulfilled in Jesus, while other things carry over, and we see Jesus, for example, talk about them in the New Testament. We see Paul talk about them in the New Testament. We see the apostles uphold that teaching in the New Testament, which obviously clearly states that certain things came over from the Old Testament from the Old Covenant into the New Covenant, and you have to work that out, right? It's not as simple as cut and dry of, well, if you don't do this, then you obviously don't do this either, right? It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how the Old Covenant and the New Covenant work, what that looks like, why it carries over, and it's just go watch those videos to get a very, very well-rounded perspective of how that kind of all works out. Now, this comes down, and this argument comes from the fact that the church hasn't done a good job of teaching this, and because we haven't done a good job of teaching this or understanding this, we now have people that have this argument where we go, well, I don't know. I just don't know how to answer. So do yourself a favor, take 2.5 hours out of your day, go check that out. It's going to be well worth your time. Let's keep going.
Like, a little unreasonable, don't you think? It's almost like it wasn't written for us.
Now, part of that, I want to stop that there. Part of that goes back to the moral, ceremonial, and civil laws, right? Because some of it was specifically written to the Jews in their time, in their place, for a reason, right? It's for a specific reason that God does these things and says these things. Even though they seem like totally crazy to us, there's a reason he did it in that time, and understanding the context and the reasoning are very helpful. And in this part, she's kind of right. She's touching on a bit of truth that some of these things were specifically written to them in their time, in their place. But we have to understand the things that carry over into the New Testament, obviously so, because Jesus references them, the apostles reference them, their early church teaching as well. So let's keep going.
That's crazy. Maybe it was written for the people at the time and the place. And if you want to use be fruitful and multiply.
Okay, so she's referencing argument because it's not laid out very concisely. This might seem like it comes out of nowhere. What she's actually referencing is an argument that homosexuality can't be a sin based upon the fact that, marriage, for example, because marriage isn't just for procreation. That's what she's touching on here, right? That the argument is that marriage is just for procreation, therefore you cannot have same-sex couples because they cannot procreate. I just want to show you the context that she's using. That's why she's mentioning this. So let's keep going.
Okay, now what's your argument against people who choose not to have children? Are they sinning by not having children? What about the straight couples that can't conceive? Are they sinning? Are they being punished by God for their infertility? No!
Okay, so that's the idea, okay, is that's what that last part of her argument is about, is based upon the idea that, or the argument that, well, you can't have same-sex couples because they can't procreate. It's the same sort of argument that's used. I'll also link the debate below between I forget his name, I'm sorry, an individual and James White have a debate on the subject of homosexuality. And so what you're going to see is that actually, if you go watch that debate, near the end of it, that's sort of the counter argument point that the opposition brings upon or toward James White to answer. So the idea is that's a typical argument made within the position, but it's also, again, you're putting something on top of your already misunderstanding of what the law is and how it transfers over. So though this may seem like an argument like, okay, well, no, I don't know then, because it's not just about procreation. So you're right there, right? Or we do eat shellfish and have mixed fabric. So how does this apply? Like we have to understand, especially when it comes to questions and opposition posed in this manner, it's not a matter of saying, you're just going, I don't know, and you throw it all out. It's an understanding of how the Old Covenant and the New Covenant work together, how the Jews Jewish law was for certain things, were for them in that time and that place, so that God's glory would be shown and they would be a separate people. But again, you have to all understand that within the context. So really, I guess secretly, this is a promo video to go watch those two videos, especially those two videos below from Mike Winger discussing the Old Testament law. Guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for following. And tomorrow, we'll cover another Progressive Christian TikTok.